Good morning, friends. Welcome to episode 65 of the Make Saints podcast. I'm Drew Downs, and this one is called Generations. Now, I recently saw a meme that implied Generation X will be aging out of social media. And this seemed like an odd statement since our parents dominate Facebook. This idea, this notion that got me thinking, that it shows how confused we are about generations and what this stuff means to our lives, right? There are these things that we associate with age groups, time of life stuff, like hence aging out of things. Like sometimes we'll talk about this like, oh, well, when the kids will come back when they want to get married or when they have kids. Like this idea of basing decisions around a time in our lives, right? And then there's this other piece, which is that the things that we associate with whole generations of people, as in like, how do certain people respond to the situation, right? And there are generational reasons for why Generation X might ditch social media, right? Family, commitments, values. Like, honestly, if there were a generation that is most likely to want to ditch social media in general, it would be Generation X. But the subject of this episode isn't social media, but our confusion about what motivates people and our tendency to make a lot of assumptions. There's a profound book written years ago by Mark Yaconelli about contemplative youth ministry. And one of the things that he was talking about in this book was this time of his experience in the 1990s. Like, he was a famous and popular youth minister. He had inherited all these tricks of the trade from his own father, and it was a big deal. He had the biggest youth ministry in the country, at the biggest mega church in the country, and it was such a big deal. He just worked, and it was so powerful, and all of this, right? And then it just like within a year, he had a quarter of the young people showing up. This was in the 90s, and just a quarter of the people, and then fewer people the following year. And he took it so personally, like all the stuff that he was doing wrong. And so he was trying to figure out like, what is wrong? What is wrong? And it took a lot of soul searching. It took a lot of thinking to get his head around his own problem here. It's that he was assuming that these tricks of the trade just worked and that they would work on any person of a certain age, right? And it dawned on him after a couple of years of this that what if these tricks don't work on young people? They're tricks that worked on baby boomers and older Gen Xers. What if these tricks were no longer working because younger Gen Xers and millennials don't want that stuff? It's not effective for them. And so what was being revealed was, here was an idea that he saw as a universal truth that had really only existed for one generation. The older baby boomers before he inherited it himself and started using it on Gen Xers. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, right? So we're assuming these things are universal, but they only existed for a generation. And then when another generation doesn't want it, we don't know what to do with that information, except that we're thinking about this wholly wrong. So what are some of the assumptions that we all seem to run with, like the things that we just assume about people, right? Not just a generation of people, but like people, or like young people or older people, right? And how often those don't actually define or describe all people, or let alone people from generation to generation, right? Are these assumptions that we're making geared toward actual people? Or is it entirely hypothetical, or even worse, sort of anecdotal from our own experience? And then what does this tell us about these universal truths that we come up with about and claim about people, right? What does it tell us about some of that stuff? It tells us perhaps that these universal truths that we all seem to care about, well, their truth may be far rarer than we think. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time.